Why the Minnesota Twins will not win the AL Central. Time for the AL Central season preview.
Baseball is back. The Locked On Podcast Network presents the 2025 MLB season preview, sponsored by FanDuel. All the biggest storylines and breakout stars for all 30 teams. Will the champs repeat, or will another team shock the league? From the experts at the Locked On Podcast Network, it's your team every day.
What is up, everybody? I kind of sounded like I was still saying a sentence there for the cold open, but we're back. We're here. Welcome to the Locked On AL Central season preview. We are joined by all of our AL Central hosts. We have Brandon Warren of Locked On Twins, Jack Johnson of Locked On Royals, Todd Welter of Locked On White Sox, and Justin Latta of Locked On Guardians. Then myself, Scott Bentley, Locked On Tigers. So we have a lot to go over. The title sponsor for today's show is FanDuel, of course. This whole episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This 2025, all the season previews brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Let's figure out which team will make a splash or be trash, which is kind of a fire saying. The offseason moves that change all of these teams' trajectories. You know what? Let's start with the ending. Let's start with the end of the season. As we teased in the cold open, who is going to win the division? I think that this was a weird division last year in the sense that everybody, sans the White Sox, were in it down the stretch, right? The Twins had their collapse. The Tigers caught absolute fire. The Guardians were, I think, wire to wire led, at least the entire second half were certainly very prominently up there. And then the Royals took a huge step forward as well. Outside of a historically bad team at the bottom, everyone else was in it. So who do we think is going to take the division crown here in 2025?
Well, really quick, why don't I just leave, go get something to drink, and you guys can discuss who's going to win the division. How about that?
For sure. Yeah.
I mean, for me, I'll get it out of the way really quick because the White Sox aren't even going to be anywhere near this. I'm going to go with the Kansas City Royals just basically, and Bobby Witt, I trust. I think, they really, are on the way to make the next step up. That's just where I go from. I know the Twins and the Pagoda projection, they're favored to win the division. I could see it, but I really like what I see with the Kansas City Royals. And no offense, Justin, seeing the Cleveland Guardians and them getting rid of Josh Naylor, who can never hurt me again, and some of the other guys that they got rid of, kind of makes me think that they'll still be in the contention for a wild card spot. But I really like what I see out of the Kansas City Royals.
Well, I guess I'll probably
jump in. Can still hurt you. It's not as often. He's going to haunt your games forever.
Yeah, only for 3 games and in Arizona.
He lives in your memories forever. He lives in our memories forever, too. That's okay.
R.I.P.
Well, I do appreciate the kind words from Todd there. Now I'm going to feel bad when we have to make our official predictions, and I would have to put the White Sox at the bottom. But because I know last time here when we were having this discussion, the Royals didn't really have a leg to stand on. They had made moves, but how many of you could truly believe they were going to work out? I mean, they had gotten more aggressive, but they had lost 106 games. And I think for the sake of having more fun in this debate, I'm not going to say the Royals as well because I am the Royals host. My team to win it is going to be Detroit. I believe this 1-2 punch of Skubal and Flaherty, though they had it last year, I can see it being better this year. And let's be real here, too. The only reason Detroit wasn't in it in the first half, or at least up there with Cleveland, up there with Kansas City and Minnesota, is because they weren't healthy. I mean, their star players were banged up in this one. And then lo and behold, when they went on that tear, why did it happen? Yeah, you got great bullpen production, and Skubal was dominating, but they got healthy at the right time. They got all of their key guys back, and sort of the bottom players, the guys toward the bottom of the lineup, they were feeding off of that. I'll be completely honest. I imagine the Central is going to look nearly identical to what it did last year, where 4 of those teams are going to be battling it out for months and months and months. And then you get to September, there might be 2 teams that separate themselves. It'd be far-fetched to say 3 get in again. This will be a tight division. I mean, this offseason, I did want to see Detroit do a little bit more. I thought they were going to make a pretty big push for Alex Bregman. Maybe they did, but it was Boston in the end. but they've just got a bullpen, and when healthy, that lineup is very, very sneaky. I'm going to have them winning the division by a hair.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there is a lot that could happen with this Tigers team. I think that in terms of like volatility, right? Like range of outcome, I think that the Royals and Tigers are very similar in that regard, where like the Guardians and the Twins, I think most people expect to have pretty high floors. It's like they're not going to bottom out and be terrible. We're like the Tigers and Royals are still young enough and are still new enough to this kind of competing in the division later in the year, where it's like, well, like either of them could take a step back very plausibly. And in the same breath, either of them could take that next step forward and push for 90 wins. So the Royals, the Royals have been a thorn in the Tigers' side for my entire life. And I think that now this new era is so fascinating because I was talking about it with a buddy of mine the other day. It's like, well, they got 11 WAR from one player. Like I know you can't really just do the game of like, oh, how much WAR are you going to get? And that's how many wins you get. But like, it's fascinating to me that they are getting that level of production from one player. If they even have an average supporting cast, they're going to win 86 plus, assuming Witt stays healthy, obviously, and continues that level of production. They don't need Murderer's Row to be really good and win 88 games. They're getting 11 of those from one guy. Like they just need a solid, and like Lugo was great, obviously, and Reagan's is awesome. But I think like Vinny Pasquantino, you want to talk about injuries, him being healthy this year is obviously a huge deal for the Royals as well. How much more can you get out of Salvi, etc. But I think all eyes are kind of also in the same breath on Minnesota. And that's where I want to go next, because this was a team that should have made the playoffs last year. The Tigers were the beneficiary of them not, and I will even absolutely admit that they should have. They collapsed down the stretch, and they are the favorites in most places going into this season. So I think that a lot of eyes are on Minnesota this year too. And obviously a lot of that, you want to talk about an organization that just needs to stay healthy. The Twins are kind of the epitome of that.
Yeah, no question about it. And I don't know that too many teams in the AL can go man for man with the Twins in terms of skill or depth. But again, what does that mean if your top guys don't stay healthy? You can just be an average kicking around 82 win team, which is pretty much what they did last year, as they had, I think, 28 combined games from their big three of Correa, Buxton, and Lewis. Wow. But every single spot they have a capable hitter at. They have 8 players projected for over 100 weighted runs created plus. The 9th is Brooks Lee, who is a top pick, and he's projected for 96. So they've got some thump off the bench with Jose Miranda. They've got a rotation 1 through 5. I mean, I'm not crazy sold on Chris Paddock, but they have David Festa and Zebby Matthews not too far away, about 13 miles away at St. Paul. And their bullpen constantly gets incredible marks in terms of projections, being potentially the best in all of MLB. And again, all of the potential in the world is great. I saw this team with potential last year. I saw this team with potential the year before. The year before, I went out on a limb on this exact platform and ended up being right. Did the same thing last year, wasn't really a limb, and ended up falling out of the tree. So if I were to pick a team, though, that's not Minnesota, it's Detroit, just because of the rotation. I mean, they're trying to find room for Jackson Jobe, and it's going to be hard. I love the first 2 guys in that rotation, obviously, but I'm a Reese Olson fan. I think even Cater Montero, who maybe on the outside looking in, I'm not entirely sure, showed me some things last year as a youngster. And we'll talk about additions, but getting Flaherty back, what a coup for them. Again, I think I would like to see more offense from any of the other teams in the division to really feel good about their chances. But if I had to pick one outside of Minnesota, it's Detroit for me.
I think the hard part about what Detroit is trying to do, and this is for everybody in the division, is that if you take out 2020, which we all agree we can just eliminate 2020 from all of our memories, right? Nobody has repeated the AL Central as a division champ since the Guardians did, or the Indians did in 17-18. The Twins did 19 and 20, but if we're throwing 2020 in the trash where it belongs, Nobody in this division is repeating ever. So we know in baseball, development's not linear. So Detroit did last year was fantastic, but it's hard to repeat. Look at the Guardians in 2022, won the division. They were a little ahead of schedule, and 2022 took a step back after having what everybody thought was a great offseason. 2024 won the division when the odds were kind of not in their favor. So repeating this division is really hard. And I think that the important thing is no matter who wins this division, I still think there's a really good chance that at least 3 of these teams, if not 4, are in the playoffs again next year or this year.
How far we've come, lads. What a road it's been over the
NFC North.
Yeah.
Respect the Central.
With the Chicago team and dead last, and I think that's the thing too. I like I said, I think all 4 have a viable case. Just looking at the bottom up, but I mean the key is also can catching lightning in the bottle be sustainable? I do think the Tigers are trending in the right direction, but man, they caught lightning in a bottle like you would never believe. So can that sustain? And how many times have we seen it doesn't play well to an encore? Where the Kansas City Royals were showing success basically throughout the season on those moves. So that's kind of where I just lean more towards the Royals. Again, I'm looking up. Also, though, if variance is going to dictate that the White Sox should win more than 41 games, where are the Royals and the Tigers and even the Twins, where are they going to make up some of those wins that they got by just beating up on the White Sox? Because remember, the White Sox only won 2 games against the Royals and the Twins, and you can't discount that. That probably helped both those teams be good, because I think, what was it, the Royals would have been 70, they were 73 and 74 without the White Sox helping them out, that type of stuff, and the Twins. So I'm just saying, can you make up those a couple of wins that, maybe the White Sox get 3 wins against the Twins and 3 wins against the Royals? Where are you going to make up those, extra wins, that type of stuff too? I think that has to be taken into account.
It's a great point. And I think that, Justin talked about repeating in the division, and obviously Cleveland won last year. You want to talk about variance. How confident is everybody that Cleveland back-to-back, even if it's not necessarily back-to-back division crown, just they were in the running for the number 1 seed in the American League until the very end there. They had a phenomenal season. They had the best record in baseball at one point. They're coming out of the All-Star break, and they lost one of their best hitters. There is no guarantee that, again, when talking about variance, that Cleveland is necessarily as good as they were. I think we all think that they'll be around, but that's a team we haven't really poked around at and talked about for division title last year. And they were a couple of wins from the best record in the American League,
with one of the best bullpens that you've ever seen. It was Cleveland's been known for their starting pitching.
Yeah.
And it was mostly their starting pitching was okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, but I mean that bullpen was dominant, and it's still going to be dominant, so it gives them a chance. And what I love about Cleveland's roster construction is they at least have 2 foundational hitters in, Ramirez and Kwan. Hopefully Kwan just doesn't fall off.
Well, you're wrong about the Guardians starting pitching being okay. It was not okay. It was bad. We could say it. It was bad. It was awful.
Okay.
They were not the pitching factory a year ago. No. If we can talk down on the White Sox here, we can talk down on the Guardians rotation. It was literally Tanner Bybee and okay, please let a snowstorm come in the middle of July for Cleveland, because Carlos Carrasco was had the second most innings on this team a year ago. And I'm sorry, I love Carlos Carrasco. Cleveland loves Carlos Carrasco, but he did not need to be in Major League Baseball last year. And looks like he's going to start for the Yankees this year. God bless. Love the guy. But no, the bullpen was fantastic a year ago. And Cade Smith was a guy in spring training that was the last guy on the team. He was in a hotel before opening day in Oakland, and they were like, well, if we claim somebody off waivers, you're going to AAA Columbus. They didn't, and he was their best reliever, not named Emmanuel Clase, and in some ways better than Emmanuel Clase. And again, the thing with progress and development being linear, bullpens are by far the most volatile thing you're going to find in Major League Baseball. The Guardians bullpen could still be really good in 2025. I think it will be, but they probably won't be as good as they were a year ago, which is why I think Cleveland spent so much of their offseason trying to find more starting pitching. They acquired Luis Ortiz. They brought back Shane Bieber for the second half of the year, we hope. They're hoping to catch lightning in a ball with John Means. They got Slade Ciccone. They got some other depth guys. They need starting pitching to be better this year to stave off the bullpen regression, because it was not good enough. And bullpens are volatile year to year. And I think that's also a thing I worry about with Detroit too. Detroit was carried very heavily by their bullpen, and those things back-to-back years, unless you're the 2014, 2015 Royals, very, very seldom do those things hold up year to year.
For sure. No, absolutely. We're way over time. I'm doing a bad job. We got to get to a break. We are going to talk about a move that changed every team's trajectory in 2025. It is the AL Central preview right after this. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. You can always stay in on the action with tournament games happening almost every day. There is always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is also easy to use, so when I win, I get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, we are back here for the Locked On MLB AL Central season preview, talking with all of the wonderful hosts of the American League Central, the best division in baseball, one year to the next. Let's maybe put some respect on the AL Central's name. We are going to talk in this segment about I want to talk about the best player in the division, want to talk about the biggest offseason moves in the division as well. And then we can honestly end with worst offseason move too, just to kind of see if there's a big glaring move that nobody really liked. But let's start with the best player in this division. This is such a fascinating conversation every year. This is one of my favorite questions to talk with Brandon about, because every year I get to just say, well, it probably should be Byron Buxton, but like, we don't know how many games he's going to play. Now that completely changes after an 11-war season over in Kansas City. So is there anyone that wants to be really cool and say that it's not Bobby Witt Jr.?
Jose Ramirez. Come on.
Love it.
Absolutely.
We're
just going to forget the guy who's been top 10 MVP votes for like the last 8 years.
Love it.
Can I put 1A and 1B? Because I think Jose Ramirez, obviously, I think the world of him too, because he just obviously has always destroyed the White Sox. He's a foundational player, but I do love Bobby Witt Jr. I think he is the best player just because of all the tools, what he can do on the field. He's basically can impact the game with his glove and at the plate. He's just been amazing, last year, and I think that's just only going to continue to grow, and I think he's going to be the face of Major League Baseball. That's just how much I think of Bobby Witt Jr. But I love Jose Ramirez too. I mean, those are my 1 and 2. And then I would say, yes, if Brian Buxton could ever stay healthy, he would be right up there. But it's like, what's the over-under on him playing 90 games? I mean, that's the issue right there. The other thing, though, is even though he doesn't hit, even though he doesn't hit every day, Tarik Skubal, I mean, come on, he's the great equalizer too. That's somebody that I think we're overlooking. Even though he's going to take the ball every 5 days, that guy is amazing, and he was one of the reasons why the Tigers pretty much went to the playoffs. I mean, he got them there, and now that they get to the playoffs, he was darn good in that too. I mean, or what? Wait, he kind of struggled in the playoffs, if I'm right. If I check my numbers,
he had one bad game.
One bad game.
He was still lights out. Yeah, he gave up the grand slam to Cleveland, and that was
one bad hitter.
Yeah,
bad hitter.
Besides that, he was still stellar. Yeah,
I would
won
go
the Cy Young.
For me, of guys that haven't been mentioned yet. I love Riley Green. I think just the world of Riley Green. Going to be into his age 25 season if I have the breakdown correctly, but still tremendously young. I think ideally I would prefer to have him play center if I was going to pick the best player, the up and comer, but he's got all the tools you want. Sweet lefty swing, takes some walks. I think I don't know if he's going to be a superstar this year, but I think he's on that path.
I am super jealous too that the White Sox took Andrew Vaughn instead of Riley Green. I would love the White Sox to have Riley Green because he's one of the few in that draft that's actually producing. And I mean, that was a horrible first round if you go back and look at that.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, I mean, and then maybe one more I'd throw in there, just because I said his name last year, which if Royce Lewis can stay healthy, I mean, that is a freaky type of hitter. And Riley, I love Riley Green too. Skubal's phenomenal. Emmanuel Clase in Cleveland, Jose Ramirez, Todd said, I mean, Ramirez has been killing the Royals for years. So when you say that, sends a chill down my spine because they're never able to get him out. I mean, the type of production he puts in. And yeah, with Bobby too, I mean, he's one of those guys, one of the few in Royals history that from the time he was drafted to now, I mean, just constantly living up to expectations. I mean, when he was picked, everybody said that's the next Hall of Famer. That's the guy that has to turn around the franchise. And they unfairly did it to Alex Gordon back in 2007 or 8. They were saying, this is George Brett only because he played third base. Like he was a great college hitter at Nebraska. And they were like, this is George Brett. That's unfair to do to him. But for Bobby, they did the same thing, and he almost loves it. I've asked him, 3 separate times each offseason, like, do you like this type of pressure? He's like, I welcome it. I want to have that pressure on me because if I don't have any pressure, then I'm clearly not good enough to be focused on. So to go into a year like this, an MVP candidate next to Aaron Judge again, hopefully he can live up to it. I actually just did an episode today. There was a scare when Andres Munoz hit him on the forearm. And so this being spring training and you only get the radio broadcast, everybody's panicking and not knowing what happened, but he ended up being all right. So hopefully good to go. But that's one thing I hate from the national perspective. The AL Central doesn't get enough love for a lot of talented guys they have and very underrated. And unfortunately, it's just because they're not, like in the AL East with the Yankees and the Red Sox. And there are some really talented guys here. And, even in Chicago, Luis Robert, when healthy, is a very good center fielder. So every team out here does have a star.
Yeah.
Luis Robert Jr. won't be on the Sox for long, though.
I think that's a great point. I think when looking at the offseason, one of the conversations that everybody talks about, at least in our fan bases, is, comparing and contrasting off seasons. And that's, I think, very fair to do between the fan base now, because 4 of the 5 teams, as we've talked about, were all in it. And 3 of them especially were pretty much neck and neck the entire last month of the season. So is there a move specifically this winter, whether it's your team or just across the AL Central in general, that really stood out to anybody as like, this is a move that can completely change? I mean, how wild is it that, a year ago, when we asked this same question, I'm not sure anybody outside of maybe Jack said that Seth Lugo would be that type of addition. And then he puts up a Cy Young caliber season and ends up being one of the best ads, if not the best value add of the entire winter. Is there anything like that around the entire division this year?
Well, if you're looking for like a sneaky good move, I like how Jacob Junis went with Cleveland on that. I mean, I was kind of hoping he would come with the White Sox just because of his versatility. He's a very good reliever, but he also was, he had 5 strong starts with the Reds. So I was kind of actually hoping he'd come to the White Sox, but again, they were pinching their pennies. So I think that could be a sneaky good move. I liked, again, what the Tigers did in terms of adding Flaherty and even Gleyber Torres. I mean, yes, he's not the greatest hitter, but he at least will provide you 15 home runs for a lineup that could use some pops on there. So I like those moves in particular in terms of one that's sneaky good or could have sneaky value. And I liked what the Tigers did in terms of getting Flaherty back and Torres.
Yeah, the Tigers for me had the best offseason in the AL Central. And to be fair, when the White Sox, how many times did they win the offseason? Bob Nightingale, I think, over and over kept declaring them World Series champions and got the kiss of death. So the offseason doesn't always win you things. But yeah, getting Jack Flaherty back to go next to Tarik Skubal is a great move. And, the fact that Jackson Jobe has to compete to join that rotation now. And yeah, Gleyber Torres, the guy's 28 and he's betting on himself going into next year. That guy is going to be incredibly hungry and motivated. So that's going to be fantastic for them. I think that they had the best offseason, but we'll see how that plays out on the field. And I have to give Jack credit too for something before too. He was talking about like off-season additions last year. I was on here last year and I said, well, Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha and Hunter Renfroe, those guys will be traded at the deadline. Like those were all moves to help boost the farm system. I could not have been more wrong about that. They brought something together I didn't think they could. The question is, will they repeat? I think adding Carlos Estevez to their bullpen was a good move because that was the one thing the Royals didn't have last year. If that bullpen didn't melt down time and time again last year, the Royals are AL Central champs. So that was the only thing that really kept them from that. And I think having Estevez will certainly help them. Plus they've got, Lucas Erceg and some other guys now.
The offseason acquisition with Estevez was huge because it allows Lucas Erceg to kind of move into that fireman role where, last year, if you burned him in the 6th or the 7th, who the hell was closing out the game at the end?
Right.
Even Hunter Harvey, when they brought him over, was never really healthy. James MacArthur, Talked with him down in spring training. He was not healthy in the second half. John Schreiber wasn't the closer type. So to bring in Estevez, a guy with closing experience, it allows them to have that flexibility. And Jonathan India, I mean, I know that, I was the one that watched all the Royals games, but they got no production for the leadoff spot. I mean, Michael Garcia, Michael Massey, Tommy Pham, none of them stuck up there. And India was somebody who had a top 5 walk rate last year. That's behind Aaron Judge and Juan Soto and Nathaniel Lowe, guys that are known for drawing a lot of walks. So I do believe that'll give them a bit of a boost right ahead of Bobby Witt Jr. and Vinny Pasquantino. But my favorite move of the offseason, next to Jack Flaherty, because I think in the postseason, as I predicted the Tigers to win it, when you can go Skubal and Flaherty, that's night and day different than what they had last year, where it was, hey, Skubal can go give you 6 shutout, but then you're going with an opener and a bullpen game after that. So to have Flaherty, who then did it for the Dodgers again, is going to be phenomenal for them. But I love the Luis Ortiz move for Cleveland. I mean, I think we can all agree here, Cleveland's a pitching factory. No matter who they bring in, it could be a failed starter, they turn into an elite reliever, just a failed guy in general, or nobody they're talking about, and they turn him into a stud. I know last year the rotation didn't have the year they expected to, but they made up for it with the best bullpen in all of baseball. And to have a guy like that, the upside of Ortiz, don't be surprised when at the deadline we're talking about him being one of the better arms in the American League Central, because I love this stuff overall. I thought it was a sneaky move, and Cleveland's usually good about subtracting and then adding a little bit where it makes you think initially, why would they make that move? And then it usually ends up being a really smart move.
Yeah, basically took all my answers, guys. So I really appreciate that. No, I was actually going to talk about Jonathan India. It gives them an element of the offense they just don't have and didn't have. Someone getting on base. It was a swing, and swing some more offense. And that works too if you make a lot of contact. And, they made it work. And so that was going to be my sneaky one, because I thought Jack Flaherty was kind of the obvious one. And it's pretty telling how little this division did overall, that a move to get a team back to where they were a year ago in terms of the top of their rotation stands out. It was a pretty quiet winter. I mean, if you're going to force me to pick something that happened that I think is interesting, I mean, Ty France looks like he could be decent, and he signed for $1 million, and we'll see what happens there. But maybe Harrison Bader, he's going to fill a very specific role on the Twins as a right-handed hitter. Their corners are left-handed. Even with Max Kepler out of the picture, they have Trevor Larnach and Matt Wallner out there. And I think they want to let Wallner hit lefties, or at least see if he can kind of figure that out. But putting Bader out there as a situational guy against lefties, Rocco loves his platoons and matchup splits and that sort of thing. And I think Bader's got the athleticism, the defense to be really nice in a corner. Obviously, elephant in the room is he'd be the backup in center if Buxton goes down. If I have to pick someone that hasn't been discussed yet, maybe it's Harrison Bader.
No, I love it. And before we get to a break, I just also want to point out, because this was a quieter, I would say, offseason for most of the teams in this division, if I want to go really off the wall, you could almost say that one of the biggest ads of this division that's not even truly an ad is just Vinny Pasquantino being healthy. It's a guy that missed, obviously, the entirety down the stretch for the Royals last year, and just him coming back and reinserting himself into that lineup, I think is a huge boost. So let's get another break. And on the other side of said break, we are going to talk about teams that could make a big splash or could be trash. This is the AL Central 2025 MLB season preview. There's nothing quite like the energy of an MLS match. The chants, the atmosphere, the last-minute goals. If you want to experience it all live, Gametime makes getting tickets easier than ever. With last-minute deals, all-in pricing, and the lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLS tickets. Plus, ticket prices actually drop as kickoff gets closer, so you can score amazing seats at a great price. It's easy and affordable. I just checked the Gametime app, and there is an incredible deal for this weekend's matches, cheaper than I expected. And there's so many great features as well. The seat view feature is one of my favorites. because I can see the exact view of my seat before I buy my tickets. There's no surprises when I get to the stadium, and also just the general peace of mind that you have when buying tickets through Gametime. They have an event cancellation protection policy and job loss assurance, so I can buy with confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we're back from break here, third and final segment. Want to talk about some big picture stuff with this division. I want to start off with just who is on the hot seat, because I think it's so easy to just point at the White Sox and be like odd man out, right? Like the, but especially after last season. But I think that there is some teams in this division that if they don't win, it's a big deal. If the White Sox don't win, it's not a big deal. And I think that there's a huge difference between that. So, I mean, legitimately, where my brain goes to is how many opportunities does the Twins regime get? And I know a lot of that has to do with injuries, so that's not completely fair to just pin on the organization as a whole. But is this something that they are going to be willing to just continue running back year over year and hoping that they can just get a healthy season one of these years?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a valid question. And Derek Falvey was just promoted to team president. So, I mean, in terms of regime changes, I think you go, trickle down economics, and Rocco gets booed if that's the case. Because if you trust the incumbent to rise up the ranks in terms of front office stuff, you probably shuffle the deck chairs a little bit. If this team goes like, let's say 77 and 85 or something, that at that point, everything that you've accomplished from 2019 and 2023 is a distant memory. And then every other year has been an average of like 83 wins, which, I mean, 83 wins is fine. It's tragic if you're the Yankees, and if you're, if the White Sox right now, if they got 83 wins, you'd be throwing a party. So I think, there's some element to that. I think they have enough young talent that you would not hit a hard reset, but it would definitely be, all right, we tried the Rocco thing. What's the next? And I wonder if they'd go with a, players type of manager, like a Dusty Baker, Bruce Bochy type that's more experienced. I don't know who that is. I mean, Joe Madden comes to mind, but I don't know that he's in that capacity anymore. But they've hired from his tree, so I could see them going with a seasoned veteran manager if they decide it's not working with Rocco. But I don't think they're super close to that point just yet.
Well, I think the Twins also just have to figure out who's going to be owning the team. I mean, that's who's on the hot seat. I mean, the fans basically forcing the Polans to even put the team up for sale, and then Jerry Reinsdorf making a boss move. I mean, that was a boss move. Calls up Justin Ishbia and says, hey, buy up some more shares and maybe you'll get right of first refusal. I mean, we don't know what the future of what that is, but Ishbia pulls off his deal, pulls his offer off the table, and now the Twins are figuring out who's going to be the owner. I mean, they just announced that it's not going to, till July that they might decide if they're even going to sell. So I think that might play a big role. And that's why I would just probably be Rocco would be on the hot seat, because you can shuffle the deck chairs there. But are you really going to make a huge major front office change knowing that we might be selling the team and we're going to let the new owner decide on who's going to be in charge of that team?
I would go as far to saying it's a bit of a cop-out answer, but dare I say nobody? Like, it can't be, AJ Hinch. The Tigers were phenomenal last year down the stretch. It's not going to be Matt Quatraro. They went from 106 losses to winning, 3 playoff games and one in New York against the Yankees. It's definitely not going to be Stephen Vogt, who just won Manager of the Year on the American League side, and Will Venable just began, and he's got a blank slate here. And the reason I say no on Rocco Baldelli is if the Twins go 80 and 82 and they're hurt, why is that Rocco Baldelli's fault? Like, if you bring in somebody else, right, and they take over and it happens again, well, then that's the same reason why they didn't win with Rocco. To me, what it would take is another catastrophic collapse late where you have a 5-game lead or something like that, and then you just bottom out. Or, I mean, which I just don't envision happening, even if the Twins aren't healthy is if they lost 100 games. Like, it was just that weird trajectory of nothing went right. Things weren't working well. Guys took steps back. The best players got hurt. But I would go as far to say nobody. It's definitely not, it can't be in Chicago. You can't fire a guy when you didn't do enough to make that a winning team. It can't be Vogt, who just won AL Manager of the Year. It's not going to be Quatrero or AJ Hinch. And I don't see how it's Baldelli's fault. Maybe Twins fans do feel differently, but I do believe that it's still a very talented team, and he's proven that. They just weren't healthy. And if health is a problem, then that's a player issue, not a manager issue.
Well, Brandon, you can speak better to that too. It sounds like the Twins fans took their anger and directed it where it needed to be. The ownership, hey, you're not, you spent a little and then you stopped spending, and you're not spending enough to cover that, to give yourself depth. And it seems like that's, the fans want the owners fired. For example, for the White Sox, who's on the hot seat? Jerry Reinsdorf. He's on the hot seat. They want him to sell tomorrow because there is a billionaire owner. There's a billionaire willing to buy the team. He just won't do it. So I think it's more ownership is really who's on the hot seat, but you can't fire the owners.
The bar is so low in Minnesota for ownership, you could call it Cheers. That's how bad it is. And it's literally, it's a bad ownership group that bought it 40 years ago from a guy who was a blatant racist. I mean, the Twins have been absolutely snake bitten in their ownership groups for the existence of the team since they came over from DC. And so, I mean, Ishbia would have been a huge coup for this fan base and everything, but honestly, just someone who doesn't suck. Honestly, like, I don't know if that's too on the nose and sharp or harsh, but someone who doesn't suck.
Raise your hand if you in the AL Central like your ownership group, because I feel like the only person here should raise their hand is probably Jack, because they're still in the Royals are still in the honeymoon period with Sherman, who was part owner of the Guardians. So I think he's the only one who gets a pass. I think everybody else here. I know the older Illich is spent in the World Series contending days, but the younger Illich,
nobody likes Chris, dude. Yeah, no, you're right. Yes, you're correct.
Yeah, nobody in this division should like their ownership group. So
no,
that's not one.
I think that's a great point. I think I love Jack's answer too, of just kind of like, we don't have to give an answer. Like it might just be nobody. Let's end the show with a fun kind of just bold prediction. This is how we've ended the last couple as well. Just bold predictions for the year. It can be on your team. It can be on other teams in the AL Central. Let's just go kind of around the horn to end the show and just kind of talk about one bold prediction you may have for your team or any team in the AL Central.
The Guardians haven't had a outfielder hit 20 home runs since 2010 in Sin-Soo Choo. Wow. That changes this year. Lane Thomas hits 20 home runs, might even steal 20 bases. I think Lane Thomas is a 2020 player, and that would be the first time the Guardians have gotten that in, I think, 15 years.
Miguel Vargas is going to hit 25 home runs after hitting 150 coming over to the south side, because he added 20 pounds in the offseason. I'm willing to give him one more chance, and he's looking really good in spring training. Obviously, he's hitting the ball in the dry Arizona air, but he beefed up, added 20 pounds. Looks like he's in better shape, better able to handle it. So there. I'm not going to say all-star, because last year I said Andrew Vaughn was going to be an all-star, and it turned out I wished some evil on him. So I'm just going to say Miguel Vargas will hit 25 home runs.
I believe that, bold takes are supposed to be outlandish and fun, so I'll have one. I think Jack Caglione debuts in June, and he goes on to hit 15 home runs or more in his first season here. I think the Wyatt Langford comparison of you send him down to AA, first month of the season, he hits 380 to 400. I mean, the Royals have been very clear about if he hits well early on, they're going to try him in the outfield and see. And he throws 99 off the mound, so his arm's going to play in right field. But the more, and it's not this spring training, it's more of how they talk about him. I don't think they're going to have any sort of service time manipulation. And since they didn't add that big impact bat, there is a real world possibility in which they view him, even though it's a lot of pressure on a rookie, to be that huge middle of the order bat that has so much power.
Not a single AL team is projected by Fangraphs to win more than 86 games. I'm going to say the AL Central winner wins 91. And I think it just ends up being a dogfight where one team emerges late and just outlasts everyone. If you haven't seen, 14 of 15 teams are projected for 76 to 86 wins. I cannot imagine an AL more closely and tightly contested. It's exciting for this point of the year that so many teams have hope. Sorry, Todd, about that. But I feel like we're getting so much mileage out of your expense, and I apologize. I just think that
it's earned.
I think that someone runs away with this division, and as weird as it sounds, 91 or 92 wins nabs this division, and it's by 4 or 5 games. It's they get a nice week to clinch and kind of relax.
Yeah, your point about the American League is a great one too. I mean, especially with the injuries the Yankees have seen, and with Houston not being, like peak Houston anymore, like this is the most wide open the American League has been in a decade. Like I don't think that's that outlandish to say. So going to be a really fun year. As far as bold predictions go, I mean, like, I would love Jackson Jobe to like win AL Rookie of the Year or something like that. But I honestly, the player that on the Tigers that I consistently go back to for these types of like dark horse or bold prediction questions is Parker Meadows. If he can stay healthy, I promise you, this dude is one of the biggest difference makers in the entire division. He started off the season last year as the opening day center fielder, hit like 070 and was just the worst hitter on the planet. Got demoted back down to AAA for a couple of months. From when he came back up to when the season ended, he was one of the best players on the entire team. He is an elite defender in center field. He is an elite base runner, one of the fastest sprint speeds in ball, and ended the season with an OPS plus over 100, despite the fact that he was literally batting sub 100 6 weeks into the season, playing every day. So if he has figured it out and is going to be that, I genuinely think, and is healthy, he's hurt right now, I genuinely think he's one of the like more valuable players that nobody really knows about yet. So that's going to be one of my bold takes. Appreciate you all for hopping on. This is always fun. We do this every single year about this time. All of our division previews at Locked On for the 2025 MLB season preview. Goodness. Subscribe to Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts for more on, obviously, Locked On Twins, for the Royals, the White Sox, the Guardians, and the Detroit Tigers. You can subscribe to Locked On Twins, Locked On Guardians, Locked On White Sox, Locked On Tigers, Locked On Guardians. Did I get everyone? Locked On Royals? Did I get everyone? Yeah? Okay, cool. Be sure to subscribe to your favorite team, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.